Oh, I'm so sorry.
It's okay. Just leave it.
No,
Please, just go.
Hi, Ahmed. Congratulations on winning the 11 Second Club. My name is Don Kim. I'm a mentor here at Animation Mentor teaching body mechanics. It's my pleasure to give you a crit or some feedback on your animation. I did have a look at it earlier and really nice work, nice level of polish. I like the storyline behind your animation, nice acting. So let's have a look at it together here.
oh, I'm so sorry.
It's okay. Just leave it.
No,
Please, just go.
Nice. I like the contrast in your timing, between the faster moments and the slower moments, just to help to sell some of the acting and emotion in the scenes. Posing is nice.
oh, I'm so sorry.
It's okay. Just leave it.
No,
Please, just go.
I like that little beat where he's kind of stumbling with his words and then trying to, figure out something that he can do to fix the situation. Nice little anxious kind of awkward acting there. And I like her frustration. They're building up of her frustration and her just kind of wanting him to leave, being dismissive with him. It's definitely reading in the acting. And then him kind of sulking off is a nice little touch at the end there. So really nice stuff overall. Like I said earlier, nice level of polish in your splining, which is great. So yeah, I just want to give you some feedback, maybe just to help with some clarity in the acting, just to make the action itself and story play a little bit clearer and maybe a little bit stronger. And then just some little animation tips or suggestions that might just help to make it a little bit stronger as well. So first thing I was going to say was the librarian I know, again, it's one shot, so it's not like you can have too much going on, but it felt like the librarian just kind of pops up sort of out of the blue a little bit. So it takes you a bit of a moment to understand who she is. So what might be better, and this is again just a suggestion, is before we see the magician, maybe have her like walk through the background. Maybe she could be pushing like a book cart or something. So it looks like she's working there, and just make her look kind of like, angry or just not happy, not happy to be there, or just a little bit, like you don't want to mess with her. She has that sort of attitude, and that way when we see her later on, it already sets up that, oh, this person is the librarian, right? So when you see the reaction later, you can kind of relate to it a bit better. The other thing I was going to say is I would probably focus the framing a little bit more on the fishbowl instead of having all of this negative space on the right. I know his hand comes in, so I know why you did it, but just to kind of set up the fish a little bit more from the start, so we kind of focus our attention on the fish. So maybe a bit tighter on the bowl. And then in terms of the fish, I would have the fish a bit more toward the center, not dead center, but maybe just left of center. When we're looking at like our attention, our eyes usually kind of focus to the middle of the frame. So just having him a little bit closer to the center will just help to focus our eyes, the audience's eyes toward him. And again, tightening the framing will also help with that as well. Just kind of set up that the fish is an important part of the animation or the story here. And then instead of having his hand come in here in the close-up, what I'd probably do is just snap pull out, and actually snap pull out to the two shot, then have him hit that pose with the wand, like directing the wand toward the fishbowl. I like these poses. I felt like this one though, because his wand is like way up here, it didn't really feel as though he was directing his magic toward the fish. This felt more like a conjuring kind of pose, like, when like, witches in front of a cauldron or something, they're trying to conjure something up, so they kind of go, trying to get the magic to come out like upward. But this magic felt like it should be more directed more laterally toward the fish. So I would almost flip these poses. I'd probably like this would be the magic pose, and then this would be kind of like the not exactly that, but like having him lean back a bit, just kind of set up that he is about to do something. Maybe he could be holding the wand toward the bowl, but it's more just like him settling into his position. And he's getting ready, right? Then you can have an anticipation, and then have him go into this pose. So the anticipation might be like he kind of leans back and he brings his arms up, and then when he goes to do his magic, he leans forward, kind of like this, but closer, I think, because the wand should be closer to the bowl. And it should be more sort of angled in profile so you can really see the wand very clearly directed toward the fish, actually, not necessarily to the bowl, but directly, that line of action right to the fish. And then like all parts of his body, it's just helping to support that gesture with the wand. So kind of like what you have here with the hand kind of directed toward the wand hand, his body's kind of leaning in the direction of that wand. Like everything, just the line of action, just helping to make it clear that connection between the tip of the wand and then the fish, right? And then with the fish, the magic is cool, but what I was going to say is maybe you can have the fish before it becomes huge, right? You can just have it kind of pop a little bit bigger in the bowl, just to set up a bit of anticipation, so that the audience kind of understands, okay, he's trying to make this thing bigger, right? So it can like pop big and maybe fill the bowl before it becomes huge, right? To kind of get kind of cue the audience. And that way it's just a little bit clearer what happens here. When the fish gets really big, what I was thinking is maybe you could have it overshoot. So instead of it going maximum size and then just flopping down, maybe it can go a little bigger and then snap back, right? So if it goes a bit bigger, because he does stagger back here, right? The magician or the student, he staggers back. So making that a bit more of a physical motivation as well, that he gets pushed back rather than him just kind of cowering. Like the fish kind of gets a bit bigger than it ends up being, and it pushes him back, and maybe he staggers back because of that, right? I think that might just, again, help to sell the two things. It's just make it feel a bit more physical, and the second thing is just makes the big pop and growth just a bit more impactful, a little bit more clear. And then you can kind of snap back and maybe have a little bit of a jiggle or something, again, just to help to sell the idea of it becoming this huge thing now. The librarian and the fish are fighting for a little bit of visual attention. It's not too bad, but maybe what I was going to say is maybe you shift the librarian a little bit more to screen left, just a bit more, so that this is a little clearer in here in the middle. You do have her stagger backs, which is great. So you have her start a little bit more center, which is great because then your eye is kind of directed toward and you're following her as she's like staggering back, and she's in the foreground too. So that definitely helps with just making focus on her as well. But when she settles at the end here, maybe just have her a little bit further over. So now we're focused back on the fish, and we're focused a bit more on him too. Maybe also he shouldn't be so far over to screen right. Maybe he settles like here somewhere, right? Again, just trying to keep everything that's important sort of a bit closer to the center so that your eye is drawn to that a bit easier instead of him being so far to the right. Because now the focus should be on him and the fish. So when the snap pulled out, this big fish, got huge, and then you see the librarian react, and now we're back to the magician realizing what he did, right? So then you have this bit here where he's totally shocked, and then he looks over at her because he heard her gasp. So now we're focused back on him. So you can see how when he starts to run toward the camera, he's getting quite cut off here on the right. So if you had him a little bit further to the left, you would keep him a bit more balanced in the frame, right? That will just help with with clarity as well. I think also maybe what you should do is when he comes toward the desk here, he should probably settle a little bit closer to her. And he could be a bit bigger too. I think it's okay if you overlap the fish a bit more at this point, because now the fish is of lesser importance in terms of like what's happening at this moment. Now this moment's about him being very apologetic to the librarian. So you don't have to have the fish fully in in the clear. So you can actually have him, I think you can have him settle closer to the table, right? Like this. Because I think you want to make it feel a bit more like he's a bit more earnest in trying to seem apologetic and trying to make amends for what he did. So him coming closer, maybe leaning forward a bit more toward her, looking a bit more sheepish, which just to help sell the acting a little bit stronger. And then with her, when he comes, okay, so the one thing I was going to say is I like how she staggers back here, but when she settles, what I would suggest is maybe have her continue to kind of like breathe hard. Like, she's startled. So she's trying to catch her breath. So she could just be like, and then she could be starting to slow in her breathing toward the end, right? But initially she's kind of, a bit more taken aback, more startled. So she's kind of breathing a bit heavy. And then instead of her just like looking in one direction, because right now she's just kind of looking over here the whole time, maybe at the eye of the fish. I think she should be kind of like looking around, like, she's just something really crazy just happened. So she'd be more startled in that she's trying to take everything in. So you'd be kind of turning her head, kind of looking at the fish like from all angles, seeing what distraction it created, right? Initially, breathing hard, startled. And then after she's done that, then she can turn and look at the student, right? So you gotta make that very apparent that she kind of, maybe she leans forward or something, or turns her head very distinctly, that she's like looking at, she's focused on the student, because now she realizes, she put two and two together, he caused this, right? So then she's kind of turning at him. You can maybe like, I know it's kind of a 3/4 back, but you can like narrow her eyes, lower her brow to make it look like she's angry, right? So even from that, 3/4 back angle, you can kind of still see that she's showing him an expression, right? And that's when he kind of looks at her, right? And then he realizes she's really pissed. So now he runs up to apologize, right? So I think that will help to, again, sell that dynamic between the two of them, so it doesn't feel like he suddenly, gets apologetic, without it feeling motivated enough, right? I think there is, enough in the action and the dialogue to kind of sell that he feels sorry, but just to push that a bit further, that she's like reacting toward him, and then you can tell that she's upset. And then he comes over. Like I said earlier, with the fish kind of growing and it kind of gets a bit too big, like it overshoots and then snaps back, causing him to stumble backward. What you could do is, instead of him having his hands over his head like this, which just, it feels a little bit like unmotivated. When you do that, it feels more like something's falling on your head. You're trying to cover your head, protect yourself. So it doesn't really feel motivated that he would put his hands over his head. If anything, I think he would put his hands in front of his body like this and stumble back. So if we had the overshoot of the fish, it pushes him back, maybe his hands in front of him. He stumbles back a bit. And that way it feels a bit more related in terms of like what's happening physically, how he moves his body. So I think that would just make it feel a bit more natural. And then I feel like his glance to the librarian here when she gasps, I don't think you should hold it for as long, because again, like the focus should be the fish right now, because he wasn't expecting this to happen. So it became huge. So he could glance at her, right? Because he hears a gasp. You hear a gasp, you want to see what that is, right? But your focus is more on the fish. So it'd be more of a quick glance instead of him kind of staring at her for a second and then looking back. So I'd keep the attention more on the fish. But then after he's looked at the fish the second time, like after the glance, and then he's absorbed everything that's happened, then he can start to think about, oh, now I can tell that she's mad, right? And that's when you should have a bit more of a thinking moment before he goes to run up to her. Because right now you have a little bit of it there, but I feel like you can push that a little bit further. Maybe have it just a little bit longer, and then maybe just change his expression a little bit more. Make him feel, because right now it's still shock, shock, shock. But just have him like maybe lower his brow, squint his eyes a bit or something. Maybe he has a bit more of a like a closed mouth. So it just feels like, he's realizing that she's angry at him, right? And it's uncomfortable. But I think you need to push that just a little bit further. I felt like the transition from this pose to this pose, this pose to this pose felt a little bit too even, maybe a little bit too simple. I think you just need something there to help with him feeling a bit more anxious. I'm not exactly sure what that should be, but it would have to be something subtle. But right now, it just feels like this transition is a little bit too simple and a little bit too even. So it's not really feeling like he is getting, feeling more anxious before he goes over to talk to her. So maybe think about this moment, this transition a little bit more.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I like this initial gesture. It's really nice.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I like the contrast there. You have the arms come up, the head come down, and then you have the nice opposing forces there with the head going up and the arms going down. That's nice.
Oh, I'm so sorry. That's
The other thing I noticed about his head angle is that it seems like it's always angled to the left through all of his dialogue until he turns to walk away. So not that it's bad to have it angled that way the whole time. I guess it makes sense because he's kind of like leaning toward her, like where she is directionally. However, I feel like just for the sake of contrast, maybe just to get a bit of asymmetry in the acting, maybe you change up the head tilt. So maybe like here it's still tilt. Like I guess it's tilted a little bit here to the right as it's a bit of drag. But maybe when he settles here, you tilt his head the other way, right? Just for some contrast. I think it might still be okay. I think it might still work. And the other thing I would do is maybe push the overall pose itself to make him feel a bit more sheepish, a little bit more anxious. So what that would be, just as a suggestion maybe, is maybe lower his head just a bit more like this. Maybe his head kind of sticks out a little bit more toward her. Maybe you drop the shoulders a touch more. Just a little tweaks, but just to help to push maybe his wrists are a little bit angled down a bit more as well. They're not so in line with his forearm. But yeah, just little things just to make him feel a bit more sheepish or cowardly, maybe slightly. But just try to push that pose because he's in that pose for a while. So you want to make sure that pose is nice and strong. And it's the strongest it can be to communicate his attitude, his emotion. And then I was thinking, don't have him turn to the fish here. Because at this point, she's speaking to him, right? And you can tell that she's really upset. So I think his focus would stay on her. So he would kind of stay in this pose, like listening to her. Sorry, this pose, just kind of still listening to her and seeing what she's going to say next. Then once she's kind of finishes her first statement, then that's when he kind of thinks what he can do. Like, what can I do to make this right? And that's when he can turn. Sorry, right here. He can turn to the fish. It's like, no, but I can do this, right? And that's when he would turn back his focus back to the fish, because that his thought process is before he was listening to her, and then kind of like reacting to her being upset with him, and then when she finishes speaking, he's like, oh, you know what? I can maybe do this to make it better, right? And then his focus then kind of switches back to the fish and trying to figure out what he can do to fix things, right? And that way it's a bit clearer to like his thought process. So back to the librarian here. when she is like going into this pose where she looks like she's rubbing her nose, like she has frustrated, she has a bit of a headache or whatever. I like the pose. Definitely communicates her frustration. I feel like maybe she kind of just stays in a frozen pose for too long, like her body does. I mean, you can see that her fingers are moving and her brows are moving, but I think maybe she can kind of start up, and then when she's rubbing her nose, she can come down like this. So she can tilt her head down, and she can bring her shoulders up, just to kind of sell a little bit more of that sort of body tension, right? As she's rubbing her nose, instead of just her staying in that one pose, rubbing her nose, feels a bit too isolated. But she can just kind of hunker down a little bit as she's rubbing her nose. Again, just kind of show a bit more tension in her body. Her brows seem like they're moving a bit too much as she's doing this. Maybe they just kind of start, they're angled down in the angry pose, but just continue to kind of drop down a little bit as she's rubbing her nose. And the nose rub should be, I think, should be slower, more methodical. Because right now it just feels a little bit like it's moving too much. So maybe just a little slow it down just to make it feel, again, more like she's simmering, like she's getting, frustrated, like she's really trying to like calm herself, right? And I'm not sure about the head shake here,
No,
because it feels like I know what you're trying to go for there. Like she's like, no, 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 no. That's what she's thinking in her head. No, no. But it just feels like it's too fast and it's too short. So I don't think it really works for this beat, although I understand what you're saying or what you're trying to get across. So I would just probably either, you could try it. You can either just make it like maybe a couple of like shakes, like 1, 2, and slow it down. But I don't know if that would work either. But I would almost just continue having her look like she's frustrated, like continue doing the rubbing of the nose, and then kind of like hunkering down a bit. She's building frustration, and then it explodes here when she's like, please, right? And she puts her hand out. So I probably would just get rid of the head shake and then have her go into this pose. And I think I would make this pose a little bit stronger too. Just watch this.
Please.
So instead of her kind of staying pretty much mostly in that pose, kind of more upright, again, I'd probably just have her, it doesn't have to be a huge difference, but I think there needs to be a bit of a change here because it's kind of she is sort of changed the way that she is feeling at this point. Now it's more like, I give up kind of thing, right? So maybe she's a bit more like leaned forward a bit. Yeah, before she was just trying to control herself from going ballistic, but now she's like, I just give up. She's like, please, just go, right? So she can maybe lean forward a bit more. Maybe her hand is like closer to, actually, you know what would be good maybe is, this is more of a 2D thing, but maybe her hand ends up being, for 2D, it's like close to his face like this, right? Even though obviously she's more in the foreground, but for 2D, like that, her hand is like right, talk to the hand, type thing, right? Talk to the hand. So you could just position that hand like close to his face. And then maybe he could like even look at the hand. I don't know. Maybe again a 2D thing, but he can maybe kind of looks like he's looking at the hand, but not really. He's kind of looking at her, but his eye direction is kind of toward the hand, right? Then he can react. Although you have him kind of looking more toward her face. I think the eye line's a little bit off anyways, because it kind of looks like he's looking past her. Doesn't really look like he's looking at her face, so maybe tweak that. But maybe that's something you can explore, is maybe it's kind of like a 2D thing as well, where he's looking at her, but he's also looking at the hand in his face. And then I think I was going to say about her acting, I do like this kind of, it's clever, kind of walking away. But I was wondering if it would be better if she was a bit more dismissive with him, because she's kind of done with him at this point. She's like, please just go away. So instead of her like continuing to look at him, she could just be like, kind of turn her head away from him. She has to go back to work. She's like, just go, and then kind of do something with her hand. Just turn away, and maybe you can have her, I don't know, maybe this in the foreground, there's something like a book or something. She goes back to work, back to what she was doing earlier. And she's just a bit more dismissive. Just get out of here, instead of spending any more energy, looking at him and and the directing focused him. She's just like, get out of here, right? And then that would help to sell maybe his disappointment even more, that she's so dismissive with him that he becomes even more sad, right? And him kind of walking away. So that might just help with that as well. Look at my notes here. So when he goes into this pose here, I feel like I like it. It's really strong. It has that sort of puppy dog feel, but maybe we could push it even further. So, you could have him again, if he's closer to the desk, this will help, but maybe you can just have him kind of lean forward a bit more, like over the table almost, like he really wants for her to forgive him. So maybe he's almost like leaning over the table, like a little child would when they've done something bad. They really want acceptance. They want to be forgiven. So you can maybe just have them lean forward a bit more, maybe push the facial expression a bit more, maybe the brows are a little bit more curved up, maybe the eyes are a little bit wider, maybe make the pupils dilated a bit more, a bit bigger. Maybe the mouth could be slightly askew, Just try different ways to kind of push the expression and push the body pose to make that puppy dog feel a little stronger. I think it would just help to sell, the contrast between him feeling this way, then suddenly totally dejected when she dismisses him. When he goes to walk away, I'd probably have him drop his arms sooner. So as he's turning, have him drop his arms. So by the time he gets to here, both arms are down, and maybe he's a little bit lower in his pose. So he just looks a bit more pathetic as he walks away like this. I like how you offset the arms though, like you have the arms dropping at different timings, which is great, but just have them drop down a little bit sooner. And then maybe push this arc of his head a little bit more down and then back up. You see how you're leading with the head, but the arc feels a bit too straight. So if you had the head come down a bit more, just help to make that feel a bit better, I think. And then just some small acting stuff or animation stuff I was going to say is just take another pass at the lip sync. The lip sync is a little bit off, especially on the librarian, so maybe just do a pass on that. And then in terms of like the facial animation, just look for ways to get a bit more asymmetry in the brows and also the timing of the brows relative to the eyes so they're not twinning. Offset them a bit. Think about how you can vary the timing of the blinks, depending on like what's happening in the acting. So if it's more of a moment where they're thinking, the blink would be a little slower than if they're reacting, like when the fish gets big and he reacts, the blink would be fast, right? So just try to think about timing of the blinks as well as the timing of the brows, just to help accentuate the acting and make that a little bit clearer. The other thing I was going to say is add some squash and stretch to the face and the body too. But as the face is emoting, you can definitely add some more squash and stretch to help with the sort of organic feel to it, and also just to accent those changes in the expression, right? I think that would help. There's not a huge amount of body. I mean, maybe the student has a bit more. The librarian, in terms of squash and stretch in the body, it's not super necessary. I mean, maybe have a degree of it, but make it very subtle. But in the face, you can definitely push it, I think, a bit more. I could definitely see some squash and stretch here on the student, but when he's like running to the table and he's doing some gesturing, maybe the stuff is a bit too subtle, but doing an initial gesture and stuff, I think you can push the squash and stretch a bit more in the body as well, just to keep him feeling a bit more organic. But otherwise, really nice job, Ahmed. And again, congratulations for winning the 11 Second Club, and best of luck in your career moving forward. Take care.